The macabre history of the Veldons. Their orphanage was a front for a secret religious order. The small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, nestled between rolling hills and forgotten farmland, prided itself on its tight-knit community values. Main Street boasted a single traffic light, a diner that served the same apple pie recipe for 30 years, and residents who knew each other's business before the morning paper arrived. It was the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened until people started asking questions about the Veldons. Harold and Miriam Veldon arrived in Millbrook in the spring of 1987, purchasing the old Whitmore estate on the town's eastern edge. The Victorian mansion, with its wraparound porch and towering oak trees, had sat empty for nearly a decade after old Mrs. Whitmore passed. The Veldons transformed it into something the town had never seen before: sanctuary house, an orphanage. For children who had nowhere else to go to the outside world, the Veldons were everything a small town could ask for in new residents. Harold, a tall man with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses, spoke softly but carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. Miriam, petite and always dressed in muted colors, possessed a warm smile that she deployed strategically during town council meetings and church socials. They attended Millbrook Methodist Church every Sunday, sitting in the third pew from the front, always arriving precisely 5 minutes before service began. Harold occasionally volunteered to read scripture, his deep voice carrying through the small sanctuary with practiced reverence. Miriam organized charity drives for the local food pantry and contributed generously to the church's missions fund. The orphanage itself appeared to be a model institution. Social workers who conducted their mandated visits found clean facilities, well-fed children, and educational programs that exceeded state requirements. The Veldons had converted the mansion's spacious rooms into dormitories, classrooms, and common areas. A vegetable garden flourished in the backyard, tended by the children as part of their daily chores and education. Local businesses praised the Veldons' work. Johnson's Hardware donated supplies for maintenance projects. The Millbrook Elementary School principal, Mrs. Henderson, frequently commended the orphanage, children's exceptional behavior and academic performance when they attended classes in town. At the annual county fair, Sanctuary House consistently won ribbons for their vegetable displays and craft projects. The children themselves seemed well-adjusted during their limited public appearances. They were polite, articulate, and appeared genuinely happy when townspeople encountered them during shopping trips or school events. They wore clean, modest clothing and demonstrated remarkable discipline and respect for authority that impressed adults throughout the community. Behind this carefully constructed facade, however, a different reality was taking shape within the walls of Sanctuary House. The Veldons had not simply opened an orphanage, they had created an isolated world with its own rules, beliefs, and punishments, hidden from the scrutiny of the outside world. The first signs that something was amiss came not from official channels, but from small, easily dismissed incidents that accumulated like dust in forgotten corners. Mrs. Patterson, who lived nearest to the orphanage, occasionally heard children singing late into the night, not typical childhood songs, but repetitive chants in what sounded like a foreign language. When she mentioned this to Harold during a chance encounter at the post office, he explained that the children were learning Latin as part of their classical education program. Dr. Morris, the town's only physician, treated several orphanage children for minor injuries over the years, scrapes, bruises, and cuts that Harold and Miriam attributed to the normal accidents of childhood. The injuries weren't severe enough to raise official concerns, but Dr. Morris noted in his private records that some of the children seemed unusually fearful during examinations, flinching at unexpected movements and rarely making eye contact with adults. The Millbrook Public Library's head librarian, Miss Cranston, observed that when orphanage children visited to check out books, They gravitated toward religious texts and historical accounts of martyrdom and sacrifice. When she offered them age-appropriate fiction or adventure stories, they politely declined, explaining that such books were not permitted in their home. As the years passed, the Veldons' reputation in Millbrook only grew stronger. They weathered economic downturns, regulatory changes, and the occasional complaint from disgruntled former employees without any substantial challenges to their authority. The state's Department of Children and Family Services conducted routine inspections that consistently found Sanctuary House in full compliance with regulations. In 1994, the Millbrook Chamber of Commerce named Harold and Miriam Veldon Citizens of the Year for their dedication to child welfare and community service. The award ceremony, held in the high school gymnasium, drew nearly 200 attendees who gave the couple a standing ovation. Harold's acceptance speech emphasized the importance of providing children with structure, discipline, and moral guidance in an increasingly chaotic world. What the audience didn't know was that behind the mansion's heavy doors, those same principles were being implemented through methods that would have horrified the very people who applauded them that night. The children of Sanctuary House were being systematically indoctrinated into beliefs and practices that bore no resemblance to any mainstream religious tradition. The true nature of the Veldons' operation would remain hidden for nearly 2 decades, protected by isolation, intimidation, and the inherent trust that small communities place in those who appear to serve others selflessly. It would take tremendous courage from those who survived the experience to finally shed light on the darkness that flourished behind Sanctuary House's welcoming facade. The first crack in the Veldons' carefully maintained facade appeared in November 2006, when 24-year-old Sarah Chen walked into the offices of the Pennsylvania State Police in Harrisburg with a story that seemed too disturbing to believe. Sarah had spent 8 years at Sanctuary House, from age 7 to 15, before aging out of the system and struggling to build a life in the outside world. What Sarah revealed during that initial interview launched an investigation that would ultimately expose one of Pennsylvania's most shocking cases of institutional child abuse, disguised as charitable work. Her testimony, later corroborated by dozens of other former residents, painted a picture of systematic psychological manipulation, spiritual coercion, and ritualistic abuse that had operated undetected for nearly 2 decades. According to Sarah and other survivors who came forward, the Veldons had indeed been running a religious operation at Sanctuary House, but not any recognized faith. Instead, they had created their own belief system, a twisted amalgamation of Christian imagery, occult practices, and authoritarian control that they called the Purification Order. Daily life at Sanctuary House revolved around rigid adherence to this invented doctrine. Children were awakened each morning at 4:30 a.m. for what the Veldons called morning devotion, a 2-hour session of repetitive chanting, meditation, and confession of sins, both real and imagined. Meals were preceded by lengthy prayers in Latin, a language none of the children understood but were required to memorize phonetically. The educational program that had impressed state inspectors was, according to survivors, heavily weighted toward religious indoctrination. Academic subjects were taught through the lens of Purification Order beliefs, with history lessons focusing on martyrdom, science explained as manifestations of divine will, and literature restricted to approved religious texts and accounts of suffering as spiritual purification. Most disturbing were the rituals that took place in the mansion's basement, a space that social workers had never been shown during their visits. Former residents described ceremonies held during new and full moons, where children were required to participate in symbolic acts of purification that included extended fasting, isolation in darkness, and exposure to extreme temperatures as tests of faith and endurance. The Veldons maintained absolute control through a sophisticated system of psychological manipulation. Children were taught that questioning the order's teachings was evidence of spiritual corruption that required immediate correction. Those who showed signs of doubt or resistance faced punishments that included solitary confinement, public humiliation before other children, and forced participation in increasingly severe purification rituals. Michael Rodriguez, who lived at Sanctuary House from ages 6 to 16, later testified about the witnessing circles where children were forced to confess their darkest thoughts and impulses before the group. Those who failed to provide sufficiently detailed confessions were accused of holding back their spiritual corruption and subjected to additional purification processes. The Veldons were masterful at presenting different faces to different audiences. While townspeople saw devoted caregivers and state inspectors observed compliant facilities, the children experienced Harold as a terrifying authoritarian who claimed direct communication with divine forces, and Miriam as his devoted enforcer, who administered punishments with cold efficiency. Former residents described how the couple isolated them from potential sources of help by convincing them that outsiders were spiritually contaminated and dangerous. Children were taught that revealing order practices to anyone outside Sanctuary House would result in divine punishment, not only for themselves but for their fellow residents as well. The investigation that followed Sarah Chun's initial report expanded rapidly as more survivors found the courage to come forward. Detective Lieutenant Janet Morrison, who led the state police investigation, later described the case as unlike anything she had encountered in 20 years of law enforcement. The consistent details provided by dozens of witnesses, many of whom had not spoken to each other for years, painted an undeniable picture of systematic abuse disguised as spiritual guidance. Search warrants executed at Sanctuary House in March 2007 revealed evidence that corroborated the survivors' accounts. In the basement, investigators found a room fitted with restraint devices, medieval-style implements that appeared designed for inflicting discomfort without leaving permanent physical marks, and extensive documentation of the purification orders. Beliefs and practices written in Harold's meticulous handwriting. The Veldons' arrest sent shockwaves through Millbrook. Townspeople who had praised the couple for years struggled to reconcile their public image with the mounting evidence of abuse. Some initially refused to believe the charges, arguing that the accusers were troubled individuals seeking attention or financial compensation. However, as more details emerged during the legal proceedings, community sentiment shifted dramatically. Church members recalled seemingly innocent comments that took on sinister new meanings in light of the revelations. Business owners remembered interactions with orphanage children that now seemed to indicate fear rather than respect. In October 2008, Harold Veldon was convicted on 37 counts including child endangerment, unlawful restraint, and conspiracy to commit child abuse. He received a sentence of 25 to 50 years in state prison. Miriam Veldon pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for her testimony against her husband and received 15 to 30 years. The civil lawsuits that followed revealed the extent to which the system had failed to protect the children in the Veldons' care. Social workers had documented minor concerns over the years, but never investigated thoroughly enough to uncover the hidden reality. The state ultimately paid millions in settlements to survivors while implementing new oversight procedures for residential child care facilities. Today, Sanctuary House stands empty, its windows boarded and its gardens overgrown. The mansion that once projected an image of charitable care has become a monument to the capacity for evil to hide behind facades of respectability. For the survivors of the purification order, the journey toward healing continues, supported by therapy, advocacy groups, and the knowledge that their courage in speaking out prevented other children from suffering the same fate. The case of Harold and Miriam Veldon serves as a stark reminder that predators often gain access to vulnerable populations by presenting themselves as protectors and caregivers. It underscores the critical importance of robust oversight, thorough background investigations, and creating environments where children feel safe reporting abuse. Most importantly, It demonstrates that even in small, close-knit communities where everyone believes they know everyone else, darkness can flourish in plain sight when we fail to look beyond comfortable assumptions and ask the difficult questions that might reveal uncomfortable truths. The legacy of Sanctuary House stands as both a warning and a testament to the resilience of those who survived to tell their story, ensuring that the children who suffered in silence were finally heard, believed, and vindicated. Thank you for watching another tale unfold here on NW Storytime. Every story hides a secret, and tonight you uncovered another one. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this mystery, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep the secrets alive. Until next time, stay curious,